Okay, great. Welcome everyone to the fourth webinar in our PWNVotes webinar series, Getting Out the Vote Part 1, Voter Contact. We are so excited to be bringing you this webinar today, and I want to really thank everyone for joining us. So I'm Nana Khanna, Executive Director of Positive Women's Network USA. We are also being joined by our fabulous guest presenter, Jelena Rodriguez from Movement Vote. And you're gonna get to hear from Jelena in a little bit. But she's just a badass organizer and activist and has been doing a ton of amazing community organizing that's linked with electoral organizing, which is what we know a lot of our folks are doing that as well. And so we're really honored to have her joining us today. Thanks for being here. So just kind of recapping a little bit where we've been on this journey, and we're looking forward to hearing from you all too. So this is going to be hopefully kind of an interactive webinar. And right now folks are muted, but you can definitely type stuff into the chat box as questions are coming up. You can also raise your hand if you want to be unmuted to ask a question. And so we will do that throughout the webinar as well, because we want to learn from each other. We know that there are lots of folks with different kinds of wisdom, and you all have expertise that you're bringing to this as well. So, so again, this is the purpose of this webinar is basically to start talking about how to keep your voter contact list that y'all have been building engaged and warm until Election Day, and to start creating your Get Out the Vote plan. So we know that, five of our chapters are doing GOTV work. I'll talk about that in a minute already. Some other folks have been doing voter registration, collecting voter pledges, talking to clients and constituents about being involved in electoral, in the elections. And we know that we're not that far away. We're less than 3 months from Election Day, from the general election day. So things are, this is time to step it up. And we know that our community has a lot of issues on the line in 2018, as always. And so, so again, here are our presenters for today. I'll be presenting, Jelena will be presenting. Jelena is the Arizona State Advisor and Director of the Puerto Rico Voter Project at Movement Voter Project, which is an amazing organization that Z is hopefully going to tell us a little bit about, and I've also included their website as one of our resources for this webinar. You're going to get to hear about that. And then we're also going to hear from a couple of our chapters are going to share some updates on what they're doing on the ground. So our agenda for today, introduction and welcome, we just did that. We're going to briefly review just kind of like top line messages from the first 3 webinars, what we've covered to date. And then we're going to talk about why is voter contact important? And then we're going to go through concrete strategies and examples of how to do voter contact and what does that really mean. So okay, great. So what does PWN's electoral organizing work look like? So we have been, as part of our strategic plan, which we just adopted, we have made a real explicit commitment to stepping into electoral organizing. This webinar series focuses on our C3, 501c3 compliant electoral organizing, but you may know that we have also launched a 501c4, that is the PWN Action Fund, which the difference is that a 501c3 organization can do all kinds of nonpartisan voter engagement. So that means voter registration, educating voters about issues, educating them about where candidates stand on issues, and turning folks out to vote. There are lots of things that 501c3 organizations can do. What they cannot do is endorse candidates. So that's why we also launched a C4, the PWN Action Fund. And so there are many organizations on the ground that you can reach out to that have like a 501c3 and a 501c4 component that can also help you kind of clarify different types of information about candidates and about ballot measures. So right now we have 5 chapters implementing Get Out the Vote projects for 2018. We're really excited about that. They are doing, they're building lists of voters, they're collecting pledges from voters, they're registering voters, they're following up with voters. We'll talk about that. Our Dallas folks, led by Ebony and with like lots of support from Jelena and others, led a primary Get Out the Vote campaign that was just a couple of weeks long. I know folks have heard about this a bit if you heard our first webinar in this series. We also released an elections toolkit, which is something that we release actually most election cycles. We put together an elections toolkit, but we're trying to step it up and create more resources for folks to be even more involved. And obviously we're hosting this 5-part webinar series as part of that. We've also started to create some more specific materials that you can find on our website, like an invite letter for candidates to attend forums that PWN chapters and allied organizations might be hosting. And we'll be sending some sample candidate questions for questionnaires as well. So, concretely what we've covered on our PWNVotes series so far is webinar 1 focused on understanding your ballot, learning to read, research your ballot from top to bottom, including understanding the different candidate races, also understanding issues like ballot measures, propositions, and more. Our second webinar, and this is the one where we heard from, I think we heard from PWN Colorado and PWN Texas on building your voter universe. That one focused on registering voters, collecting pledges for voters. And then our third one, our third webinar in the series focused on candidate engagement. So that was really tactics to build relationships with candidates and to get them on record, responding to your concerns and questions, right? So right now there are, not only are there lots of things at stake at the congressional level, we know that there are many, many districts where members of Congress are up for re-election or some are retiring. And those, those seats are open, but also at the local level, there are many like district attorney races and local races that really matter to our constituency. And so candidate engagement can be at all of those levels. And so you can find recordings of all those webinars on our website. If you go to pwn-usa.org/PWNVotes. And so this is what our election toolkit looks like on the website. We encourage you to go there and check it out. That's also where all the webinars are linked, but there's information, there's downloadable information that you can read through that accompanies all of the webinars. And so our election toolkit is organized in 4 parts. The first part is preparing the vote. So basically registering voters, removing barriers to voting. Part 2 is researching candidates, issues, ballot measures. Part 3 is elevating your issue, tactics to do that. So that would be like bird dogging and going to candidate forums and things like that, candidate questionnaires. And then part 4 is focused on getting out the vote. So that means actually turning out your voters, and that's what we're going to be starting to talk about today. So this is just a screenshot, so you can see kind of what if you click on one of those boxes, like the second one, this is what pops up. And so we hope that you will go check out our election toolkit on the website. So why does voter contact matter? Well, in 2016, we know that there were more than 10 million registered voters under the age of 45 who didn't vote. And a quarter of them said the reason was they didn't like the candidates or didn't like campaign issues. But I can bet you that, a lot of folks might have been sort of turned off by some of what was happening at the top of the ticket, but I bet you like they care about things like affordable housing and they care about their schools. And you know, many of them probably care about like racist policing. And so, so part of the issue here is like, how do we help folks understand that there are lots of things further down the ballot that they may not have heard as much about that are really at stake and that impact our communities. And so that's, you know, that's part of what we know you all can do. Because you're so connected to your communities and so focused on many different issues. Also, we know that voter ID laws are becoming much more strict. The right is basically desperate to disenfranchise our community because they're afraid of the political power that is building by Black and brown folks, by progressives, by young people, by, you know, communities that have been historically marginalized. And so there are all these voter ID laws rolling out at the state level that we need to continue to challenge, but also we have to make sure that people know what their voting rights are. And so that's a piece of voter contact, is educating folks about like what kind of ID do they need to bring when they're going to vote. What are they going to need to have, you know, if they need to like re-register to vote at a different address. But also we know that especially for people who don't vote as frequently or often, and for newer voters, social and political networks are very important. So community trust really matters. And many of you all are organizers already in your communities on various issues. And so, so having, when we're getting all these like negative ads, especially as it gets closer to election day, and the candidates with the most money are sort of, running lots of ads on television, it can be very confusing and hard to know who to trust. And so, but people trust who they know, right? And who they've built relationships with over the years. And so that's why this link between community organizing and electoral politics really matters. So, so contacting voters, having that contact come from someone they trust is really important. And of course, those who are involved in their communities are best positioned to be informed on the issues, and that's all of you. So you all are working on healthcare, on reproductive justice, on addressing criminal justice, LGBT rights, a range of things every day. And so you know what the issues are and can, really create a compelling message for voters that you might be talking to. So with that, I think we wanted to hear a little bit from our chapters about what some of y'all are doing. So let's see, I just want to see who's on here. Do we have anyone from Pennsylvania, PWN Pennsylvania, who wants to share anything about the work you all are doing? I have some awesome pictures here of you registering voters and tabling. No. Okay, cool. We will move on. So I'm just going to show you a couple of examples of materials that chapters are creating. So we have PWN Pennsylvania, here doing voter registration, organizing under this banner called Progress for Pennsylvania. So one of the things we found, and Barb might talk about this in a minute as well, is that organizing under a banner that's not HIV specific has been really helpful for our community, because HIV is never, first of all, is never an issue that we are tackling alone in isolation. All of us know that our lives are deeply intersectional, and we're very familiar with having to address lots of different kinds of challenges to our rights and dignity. And so that's one reason why, organizing under a non-HIV specific banner, but using HIV as a focus can be useful for amplifying different types of issues, like other reproductive justice issues and things like that. But also, and sort of like creating a broader agenda. But also, we know that for many people living with HIV, disclosure can be an issue. And so having a larger banner to organize under, like Progress for Pennsylvania, for example, can be also very useful. So this is Progress for Pennsylvania is being led by PWN Pennsylvania. And it's the same with Progress for Texas, which is being led by PWN Texas folks. And you can see here that they have, this is an example of their flyer. So they're saying, what are we fighting for? And I'm sorry if this is kind of small to see, but these slides will be available after as well. You can see that they're fighting for access to healthcare, protection of civil rights, Social Security, fair wages, reproductive justice, LGBTQ rights and dignity, et cetera. So it's a broad agenda that you're getting folks to sign on to. And then this is a sample of Progress for Pennsylvania's pledge form. So they're saying, yes, I'm gonna vote. And yeah, I wanna support this agenda. This sounds great. Of course I wanna support it. Here's my contact information. So that's kind of how our chapters are building their voter lists. And so with that, we wanna, here's some awesome pictures of PWN Colorado in action. And I think we're gonna hear a little bit from Barb about what PWN Colorado is doing.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me all right? Yes. Wonderful. So, we have also been organizing in Colorado under the Progress for Colorado banner, and have been doing some door knocking and also get out the vote. And it has been a very powerful opportunity for us to engage with our community in a way that is not HIV specific, but that, again, sits in the intersectionality of our lives. And so from the Progress for Texas flyer, really that's actually a fairly standard format that we've been using in Colorado as well. And it is a great chance to go out and to talk to people, to really focus on communities of color. In Colorado, we have done a little bit of research and have looked at communities that are predominantly people of color, as well as have reported low voter turnout in past elections. And so we want to go and work specifically in those communities around ensuring that people are aware of their right to vote, how to vote. In Colorado, we are a mail-in ballot state, and that gets people a little confused about what they do if they are moving, or if they personally have recently been incarcerated. We have really done a lot of outreach around people who have been incarcerated and are now done with probation. And in Colorado, you're allowed to vote and register. And so we've been focusing on those communities, and specifically been working and talking to people about equality and equity and the difference between those two. And so we talk about equity and fair wages, especially on the western slope in Colorado. That is a huge challenge. In Denver and in Boulder, where people and our unemployment rate is pretty low and people are employed, fair wages are not such a challenge. However, on the western slope, that continues to be a real important issue. Healthcare access is always important. Colorado is a Medicaid expansion state, so we want to make sure that we are organizing not just at the top of the ballot, but also down the ballot. We have our representatives, we also have our senators, and then we also have our state senators and our state representatives. And in Colorado, we talk about not candidates, because we're organizing as PWN Colorado, but we talk about issues and we highlight which candidates have come out in support of equity and progressive issues, and which candidates either have not commented yet to try and get them on record, or if candidates have either taken a strong stance against progressive values, or have, more importantly, voted against progressive values. We make sure that we share that also when we're doing our sort of grassroots organizing. And for us, it's all combined. We're doing door knocking and we're doing organizing at events, and we talk to people about progressive issues. We talk about how that plays out in Colorado. We talk about how it plays out in our lives with real examples, and also have been able to really learn a lot of stories from people that are both heartbreaking and empowering, who are not living with HIV, but have a lot of challenges, a lot of loss, a lot of grief, a lot of trauma around the current administration. And so by organizing we've discovered that by going out and door knocking that we have a lot of people who want to join us because that sense of action is really powerful. So we have a three-step process, which is that we go and we either knock on doors and talk to people about progressive issues. We also ask them if they are registered to vote. We went ahead and we checked to ensure that PWN Colorado is going to be organized as a voter registration drive site. So we have our own link to the Secretary of State's website. It's loaded on all of our cell phones as well as our tablets, so that when we go out and we talk to people, we ask them if they would like to check and make sure that they're registered to vote. We use our portal, and so it's pretty easy. People don't have to spend a lot of time searching and preloading. They just go ahead, we hand them our phone or our tablet, and they go ahead and they enter their information. And they can check and make sure that their voter registration is up to date, that all of their information is correct. We've already caught 2 instances where people have been disenrolled either because they moved and their last ballot was returned, and so they would expect to vote in this upcoming really important election, but would not be registered to vote. And one other person has some faulty information that was entered at the Secretary of State level, and we were able to catch that. So I think that, you know, talking about progressive issues and ensuring that people are aware of how that's going to play out on this ballot, making sure people's voter registration is up to date. We've registered a couple of people who just turned 18, and we also were able to enroll a number of people who just recently came off of parole. So that's what we're doing. That's our second step. And then our third step is we have a postcard, and I wish I could show it to you, but we handed them all out, where we asked people if they would like to put their information down and to become part of our database so that we can keep them up to date on not just when there's going to be a candidate conversation, but also we can keep them up to date on marches, as well as progressive opportunities in the state. And then also, as it gets closer to the election, we will follow up and make sure that they have their ballot. If they don't have their ballot, we'll help them get one. If they need a stamp, we are willing to help get them a stamp or deliver their ballot and deposit it in the ballot box for them. And if it's the day of and they have not voted, we will actually be organizing voter registration pickups and drives in the Denver metro area as well as the Western Slope to ensure that people are able to get to the polls. And so that's our three-step process: progressive issues, voter registration, and then voter engagement around the actual election. And that's what we're doing in Colorado. And I have to say it's been really exciting because not only is PWN Colorado really energized about this, but we also have now a database of 50 other really active progressives and probably another 100 people who we can share information with as we move forward to continue to keep an eye on things that are very important to us, as well as communities that we intersect with in all of the complexities of our lives.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Barb. That is really great and super inspiring. I know that a lot of folks are involved in different kinds of GOTV campaigns, and we just got a little chat from Angel. Angel, I'm gonna unmute your line in case you do want to share what you shared with us verbally. So you can talk now if you unmute your line on your end.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello. All right. I'm not sure if this is great. This webinar you're doing now is perfect because I just put in an action plan for the Florida criminalization with Kamaria and them, the Florida Justice Coalition. And that's what I came up with, was working with Second Chance in Florida. What they do is they're gathering up all these people who have been charged and cannot vote anymore. And if you think about the amount of people that have minor charges from 20 years ago that can't vote, if we can rally them all up together, and it's what I'm trying to do, is set up a date, a nice event where the Second Chance comes out when we sign these people up to reapply to have their voting rights reinstated, and then also have a van on site so that we can do free HIV testing. So kind of come from the back with that. And that's what I have in mind. That's what I've been working on.
That's so awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us. Super inspiring. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Jelena, who's going to tell us a little bit about the work of the Puerto Rico Voter Project and any context that you want to share, Jelena, before we start the videos.
I think we'll just, hi everyone, this is great to be with you and share space with you. I'm a little bit hoarse. I will tell you, since last Wednesday, I've traveled over 5,000 miles. I've traveled those miles doing the thing that I love, and that is voter engagement. So this is primary day in Wisconsin. So as soon as I'm done, headed out to the street, get stuff done. But I'll tell you, I want to first say how much I honor one of your colleagues that I know personally and I met through the work, and that's Ebony. I met Ebony during the primary in Dallas, and was just introduced on email, and I was like, cool, know somebody, great, I'll say hi. When I met her, I absolutely fell in love. Ebony is all things good and all things brilliant. And y'all, she is just my sister and my friend. And Ebony, I honor everything you do, and I look forward to the silly messages you send me once in a while. Send me more. But we can play the videos, and then I can kind of explain what the work is, and we'll get into voter engagement and what that means.
Okay, sounds good. So bear with us. We're going to try to figure out how to do this.
You got this.
Yeah, thanks. Is this part 2?
It doesn't matter. They're independent of each other.
Okay, cool. So let me just make sure. Okay, sharing the right thing. Okay, so we are going to try to play you a video, and hopefully this works.
10 months after Maria, I visited with the family here about 3 weeks after Maria struck. Unfortunately, what happens in many of these situations is you get a little money for FEMA. You get started, but it's not enough. This is our homeland, right? This is our promised land, Puerto Rico. And until this family, and we can take a picture with this family, once again in their home, we can't rest. That's why it's important that people get involved, register to vote. Candidate running for governor wants your vote, ask them, what are you doing to rebuild Puerto Rico? Where's in your plan rebuilding Puerto Rico? How are you accepting Puerto Ricans and integrating them and into the society in which you want to govern over? Congressmen, senators, anybody running for president, they've got to be able to answer how this family gets to move back. This is 10 months later. They're trying. We need to do more.
A mí aquí, pues cuando yo llegué, pues mi casa se le fue el techo, está virada, perdí todito. Yo pensaba que no íbamos a morir hasta de hambre.
Cuando yo subí para arriba, porque yo he visto la claridad, ahí fue que me traumaticé.
Aquí, 9 meses después del huracán, todavía vive una pareja. Mírala donde tienen que vivir en lo que se construye su casa nueva. ¿Quién puede continuar viviendo así? Los recursos no han llegado.
Han muerto más de 4.000 personas en Puerto Rico a raíz de la negligencia crasa en la respuesta a la emergencia por falta de electricidad, por falta de servicios médicos.
Hay mucho trabajo, hay mucha gente necesitando en estos momentos de medicamentos, de agua, de alimentos.
Es el momento de pedirle a nuestro gobierno que nos represente. Yo no puedo votar por el presidente por mi condición de territorio, pero la diáspora que está allí tiene congresistas, tiene senadores, tiene un candidato a presidente de todos los partidos.
Tenemos que decirle que en este momento hay que inscribirse, hay que participar en ese proceso electoral, tienen que dejarse sentir.
Tírese a apoyar gente que quiera ayudarnos a nosotros, que quiera ayudar a las minorías.
Podemos hacer bastante. Podemos ayudar a Puerto Rico por las cosas que verdaderamente necesitan ser resueltas.
Inscríbanse, los que residen en Estados Unidos, actívense políticamente.
La diáspora, la gente que está en Estados Unidos tiene un gran poder y es la voz. ¿Y cómo la gente de la diáspora puede utilizar esa voz? Es a través de darse a oír. ¿Y cómo se dan a oír? A través del voto. ¿Aman la isla? Voten. Pueden elegir gente que realmente ame nuestra isla. Pueden elegir un presidente que le preocupe Puerto Rico. Inscríbanse. Voten. Es importante, es su derecho y es su deber. Que Dios les bendiga.
Puerto Rico se levanta.
So yeah, any reactions to the video before we move forward? Yeah, so let me explain a little bit about how we got there, and this fits right into voter engagement and how how we look to where we connect, right? Where's that point? We talk about how to keep the lists warm, how to keep folks engaged from registration to actual ballot in the box. There's a whole process in there that folks drop off, folks get misinformation, or so many things happen, right? So one of the things that I think is super powerful, and there are different ways that we engage voters and organize, right? But meeting voters where they're at. I am Puerto Rican. I was born on the island. Moved to Chicago when I was 5 years old. Traveled back and forth. And sorry, like I said, I'm a little bit hoarse, so forgive the coughing. I'll drink plenty of water so I can keep up. But and so when the hurricane hit in 2017, I knew that we had to do something. Yes, we sent clothes, we sent supplies, we sent medicine. We had folks that went and physically helped clean and rebuild. But I always knew there was something else. But I didn't know what that other something was. I was asked, actually after the Dallas primary, when I was nice and exhausted, was asked, what else do you want to do besides DA races, besides getting out our vote? What is it? And I said, I want to organize my Puerto Rican folks. I know them. I know how our folks think. I'm not saying I am the gatekeeper for all Puerto Ricans in the US, but I am someone who moved here, who understands, and who felt very deeply what Hurricane Maria and the after effects and what the island is still going through. So as a point of intersection, right, I think that that's super important. Like the sister from Florida, I cannot wait to talk to you more, and hopefully when I'm in Florida, meet with you and know more about what you're doing, how you're doing, because sister, like that is so important. You understand your community and you understand how to talk to them. I understand my Puerto Rican community, and I understand my folks don't typically vote, especially super mad. Our climate refugees that have moved to the US are so upset, right? They've had to leave home. This wasn't their plan. It was not their plan to leave their island and move to Colorado or Pennsylvania or Arizona or California or Florida. It was not their plan. It was I can't survive here any longer. And this is what I have to do. So how do you get that person who has lost faith in not only the electoral process, but has lived on the island and understood that their vote doesn't count? Puerto Ricans that live on the island don't elect the president. They're members of Congress, they're senators, one of the senators you saw in the video, he has no vote. He is elected by the people, goes to DC, sits, and does nothing. He can give his opinion all day, but he does not participate in the vote. So how do you get a group of folks that are used to not having a voice, have a voice. That is what I was tasked with. And I took it on, and I understood that I needed to be on the island. I needed to see what the island looks like post Hurricane Maria, almost a year after. I was met with some really challenging moments that I myself had to process before I could even get into the work. We started recording those videos about 5 days after I got there, and thank goodness, because I really needed to process what I saw and how folks were still living. And not only that, let's talk about complacency, and let's talk about how our folks get used to living a particular way, right? In a week, I saw that streetlights and stoplights were rare. Some of them were still standing, but rarely any of them worked. Now, can you just imagine the chaos at an intersection when you lose power and that light doesn't work, or for some reason it's not working for a little while? Like, no one knows, like, okay, do you go? Do I go? How does this work? Well, the entire island is like that. How are we figuring this out? One of the first things that I understood was that folks on the island love the folks in the diaspora being the United States, the mainland. I heard repeatedly, the diaspora saved us. We understand that folks in the diaspora were the ones who sent us relief. We know that, and thank you. I always knew, though, if I was going to make an impact with Puerto Rican voters in the U.S., that we had to tie it to the island and have the call to action come from the island. This is not something that's typically done, right? It's innovative. Lots of folks didn't get it. And lots of folks won't understand, for example, our sister in Florida, like, why not just pull up in the HIV testing van? Like, why you got to do all the rest of that stuff? Seems a little bit extra, right? But no, it isn't. It's a way of engagement. And those videos are not finished yet. Y'all got a preview of what they're going to be. But it's right? Like, how do we engage voters where they're at? How do we keep them? How do we sustain the relationship? The answer to that, and I can tell you of many years doing this, is speaking their language. Talking about what matters to them. How Ebony and her team, in a matter of a week or less, were able to mobilize 60-something voters to the polls and get them to sign up and learn as they were doing it and figure it out throughout the day and call me and ask questions like, hey, so like this is happening, how do we do this? Because they spoke the language of what Dallas wanted to hear. They went into the places that they realized they would make the biggest impact. So I am so proud of that team and to see some more of the work that they're going to do in Dallas. So I want to know from you all, what are your questions about voter engagement? What are your questions about keeping these lists and keeping folks engaged? This is in Colorado. That is absolutely what you are doing is incredible. And those numbers are so inspiring. They're real, right? And every single one counts. Folks say that these elections in November are going to be won by very small margins. And so every single vote matters. So I can open it up to any questions and then I can keep going. I mean, this is my life, so I can talk about voter engagement for days. But I want to know, what do you want to know? What are your questions? What is it looking like where you live? And are there folks that I can help connect you with that can hold your hand? I also want to talk about C3, C4, which is really, really crucial that you get a firm understanding about. But any questions?
So I know Angel has her hand up. So Angel, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And if others want to raise their hands, if you want to like discuss something or raise a question verbally, that would be great.
Thank you. That was great. So my question is, I appreciate you saying that I had a good idea here.
Angel, your sound is not very clear.
Oh no.
It was better before.
My phone sucks. I don't know the reason. Can you hear me now? Any better?
You kind kind of sound like a robot, but we can hear you.
Oh my God. I don't know how to change it. I'm like, okay, so robot will talk.
Yeah, it's kind of awesome, actually.
Yeah. Oh my God. Anyway, my engagement where I'm starting here is I'm working with oh my gosh, now you guys got me thinking I'm sound like a robot. So I'm trying to get the people engaged who I'm closest with in my community are like the homeless people I've been talking to, trying to get them excited about being able to, have a say, because there's a big homeless community down there, and through my church, I'm connected with them because we go out and do sandwiches and stuff, and they just love it. So they're like, oh, I'll go. So I've set up a table, trying to get people committed to come to the sign up. And then I'm also getting a lot of people that I know in recovery houses, because I am a substance user in all the recovery houses. That's where I realize how many people have these minor charges, and then they just lose their whole voice. And as they get, as they recover, or as the homeless people are moving up and, becoming part of life, being able to live, they're getting excited and they do want to be involved in the community is what I'm finding out. So what do I start? Like you're saying, like make a list of these names and I know what I'm doing here, but I'm not sure. I mean, I know what I want to do, but I've never done this before. This is my first stab at doing anything by myself. So.
Yeah, I think you're doing the thing, sis. You and your robot voice are doing the thing, and it was a lovely, heartwarming robot. It wasn't a robot, but you're talking it. You're doing it. You're walking it, and you are talking it. You are going to where folks are at. You are engaging them where they are, and then you bring them to where you are organizing them to be. Right. So you're understanding that this is the condition. They're either formerly incarcerated, been discarded from society because they don't have housing as most of us can enjoy. Right. They don't have that privilege. So they are, in essence, folks that we don't want to see. Right. And how do you engage someone that's used to be walked past on the street, in life, even by family? Right? How do you engage someone and help them understand that their voice matters? Meet them where they're at, right? You understand that, be it that sandwich, be it that touch, right? That hug when you see them.
Yes.
Yes. That is the point of connection, and you engage them, right? You have to constantly tell them it matters. What you say matters. You matter. And I think when you engage with them in the point that they matter as a human, the voter piece comes in, right? Marrying this piece of your everyday activism, your everyday engagement, and tying it to voter. Now, let me just caution you though, right? Ebony and I are good friends, and she sees how folks come for me, right? Because folks are like, how can you connect Hurricane Maria to voting? All you want to do is reelect folks in the US. You don't care. So, sis, in Florida, Angel, like that may come, people may come at you like that, right? Like, oh, you want to engage homeless people, like when they're mostly down, you want them to vote, you want them to do all these things, like, really? Why don't you fix their problem? And do you know the answer to that, Angel?
I would, giving them the right to vote can help fix their problems. They can be engaged.
Yeah. Like, we don't change policy, we don't change things unless we have this electoral power. It's unfortunate, right? But if we can't say Positive Women's Network registered thousands of people across the country, when policy comes up that is yours, that is real, that means something to the folks that you serve, if you don't have those numbers, it's hard to engage electeds and talk to them about how to do it. I can tell you that I remember seeing the videos and the photos of you all in DC earlier in the summer or in the spring. I think it was spring, but and knowing that you all were knocking on doors in DC and going into congressional offices and Senate's offices, when you can walk in and say, in Colorado, we registered this many voters. In Colorado, we took this many voters to the polls. In Colorado, this is our turf. This is where we worked, and this is where we got the vote out in your district, elected official or candidate. So, sis, what you're doing and what you're doing in specific areas is super crucial, right? If you can own that piece of area where the folks that you are talking about live and just exist, right? Then that's yours, and you understand it, and you understand how to speak that language.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Things folks are working on that you want Jelena support around? She's an incredible resource.
While y'all think about your question, I want to go ahead and be really super specific about the C3, C4 piece. It's very, very important. I cannot stress enough how important the C3, C4 piece is. And I encourage you to read up a whole bunch about it and understand it to its fullest. So, organizations. So let's talk about Colorado, for example. C3 and C4 folks, like Mi Familia Vota, they do both, but they mostly operate under C3. And so, and we want to make sure that you understand that C3 is voter engagement, voter contact. It's not endorsing a candidate. And that's super important to know. It's super important to stay in that lane. Again, I can't stress it enough. I encourage you to get as much reading as you can about it, understand it. And before you engage with an organization, or if a candidate shows up, make sure you tell them, I am working C3. Now, some candidates and some orgs aren't really versed on it, right? And they're like, so we had that happen during the Dallas primary. I'm not sure if Ebony was with us, but we were at Paul Quinn College, and one of the candidates came to our event and wanted to hang out. Well, it was a C3 event. And we were like, so you can't really be here. Your election is, in 2 days. So she's like, oh, it's fine. It's like, no, it isn't. So we really go team, wish you the best, but you got to go. This is not a place where you can be, because we've got to protect what we're doing, right? And we got to protect the folks and our C3 status and what we stand for. Folks are going to try you, but there's nothing wrong, right, Nana? There's nothing wrong with saying this is C3, this is technically nonpartisan, and this is not some place you can be. Please respect our space. We'll respect your space. Is that kind of what y'all have been talking about on the C3 piece?
We've been clarifying that, when, like, for example, if doing a candidate forum, if you're hosting a candidate forum, you want to make sure to invite candidates, all the candidates for a seat, across political parties, so that they have equal opportunity for airtime, basically. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's sort of where we've been focusing. Most of our, just to clarify, most of this work is being volunteer done. So is being implemented by volunteers. So where that's happening, folks have a little more flexibility.
Yeah, for sure. And then so let's talk about the forums for a second. Those are like my favorite. This is one of the points that I wrote down that I wanted to make sure that folks do, right? Like, ask your questions. So in a forum, let's say you invite all the candidates and let's say only 2 show up. I think it's really important, one, to leave those empty chairs, right? So folks know that person was invited. It's a visual that's important. It's important for a couple of reasons. One, folks know how you operate and that you're fair. And 2 is you want to make sure that folks know that that candidate could not get you into their schedule, right? So for whatever reasons, if there may be an explanation, there may not. They may just not care. They may have never responded to you. I think it's really important that when you have your forums to say what your interaction was with each candidate, and if they accepted, if they ever even answered you. Empty chairs, I think, are really, really important visual. So if we go back to the Puerto Rican vote, sorry, if we go back to the Puerto Rican vote, there's a couple of things, right, that we're encouraging Puerto Rican voters to do. One is obviously get engaged electorally, register, show up in the primaries, show up in November. That is one of the asks. The other ask is, though, and I think you saw Congressman Gutierrez say it, and that is one of the principles by which we are working in the Puerto Rican Voter Project, is ask the candidates your questions. Ask the candidates, as far as the Puerto Rican vote, what is your plan to integrate Puerto Ricans that have moved post-Hurricane Maria? And what is your plan to help communities on the island repair? There's still work to be done. So those are two questions that I bet you a lot of candidates aren't going to be ready to answer. Some will, some won't. But I think it's important that we encourage our folks to ask the questions that are important to the community that you're organizing. So in Colorado, what would you say is one of the most important questions that you can have a candidate answer?
So in Colorado, the most important question that we would ask would be about support for the ACA and ongoing support for Medicaid expansion. But now we're adding in, as we're listening to this webinar, that we would also add in if they support additional funding for Puerto Rico, and especially to match the financial support that's been given to Texas, to Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Yeah, I think that folks kind of view elected officials and candidates on this, like, I can't talk to you, I'm just like a regular person, and, you know, you're way smarter than me, and because, you know, you're on a ballot and whatever. So wrong. And not throwing shade at our candidates and our electeds, right? But the issues that are ours, that we inherently own, we know about. For example, I worked for many years on restorative justice, and my dad is formerly incarcerated. Now, no one on this planet can tell me what it feels like to be the daughter of someone that's formerly incarcerated. That's something I owned. Even folks that are formerly incarcerated cannot tell me about my experience. I own that. So I think that, like Barb said, is we have to really own the thing that is ours. And if that is legislation around HIV, if that is decriminalizing HIV, then that is what you own. And just go at it in the way that, like, no one knows this more than me. This is my life. This is what I do. I know this. I'm happy to help you, candidate or elected official, learn more about it, because you don't know everything about everyone. I don't know everything about everyone, but this thing that I work on every single day, the thing that I wake up, think about, and go to sleep thinking about, is the thing that I do know. And I am happy to tell you what that lived experience is. And I'm happy to talk to you about what legislation, or who you should talk to when legislation is in front of you. So Ebony, is Ebony on? Can she unmute? Like, don't pretend you didn't know I was not going to call on you, Ebony. Come on, really? Okay, so Ebony, do you want to talk to us? And I know folks have heard it, but let's talk a little bit about the process when the primary happened in Dallas and what you chose to do that day.
Sorry, hold on a second. I'm just having a technical glitch. I'm going to unmute Ebony. And also, just FYI, Z, I also have some more slides, like maybe after this portion, that we could go through. Ebony, you should be unmuted now.
All right. Hi, can you guys hear me? Yeah, you can hear me. Hey. So, what we did for, our primary was we, leading up to the primary, we went to a lot of debates, community events to engage people, engage the candidates, planned a community forum ourselves, invited Our important run on that ballot was our district attorney. So we invited everybody. We invited a bunch of judges, as many people as we could, and we had a community forum that was great. It was amazing to be able to talk specifically about our issues with the candidates and understand that we understood that they didn't know a bunch about it. So we were able to educate them and get some commitments for them to work with us if they were the ones who eventually got voted in. During that process, that's pretty much how we kept our community engaged, was just inviting them out to those community programs. Different people and different organizations were holding different types of community programs. So every time we found out about one, we would send emails and invite people to come with us, which was a good way to keep people on our list involved. And then up until election day, during election day, we got together and went to different places to make sure people were going to vote. If people needed transportation to go vote, we took them. If people needed information about where they were voting, we looked it up. What we found during the primary was some people's voting place has changed and they didn't know it. So it was really important that we make sure they got to the correct and proper voting location. So that's important too, to have technology so you can make sure that you can get people where they need to go when they need to go. Currently, we are building, we already had lists from primary. We have new people on our list, and the way we are keeping our people on our list engaged, we call them to tell them about different things that's happening in the community. We are going to next month text people just to say, are you still committed to go vote on, November 6th? This is just a reminder. Have you moved? Have anything changed? Should we update anything? We'll text the people who cell phones we have, and we'll call the people who don't have cell phones. The reason why we're doing it a few different ways is just because we want to try to keep people engaged and keep voting on their radar, but we don't want to bug them. So we're trying to call at one point, text at one point. Once we start having community events, people start having the community events here in Texas, we will start inviting them out to those community events. We'll be having our own community event, so of course we will invite them out to that. And then we'll be gearing up for voting day, and that will include all of us out on the street, making sure people are getting to the polling places. We will have some people making calls too to our list to make sure people are, are you ready? Do you need anything? Things like that. So that's kind of how we've started and how we have continued to engage our voters and keep them connected.
That's great. And I think the slide that's up and some of the stuff that Ebony was talking about is education about the ballot. I have a very good friend that called me last week, and he was in disbelief that folks don't know how to vote. And that is one of the reasons people don't vote. The actual, how do I do this, is really important. So we need to demystify the actual voting, right? How do you, is it a machine? Do I punch? How does this thing work? Is it crazy? Will arms come out from the sky? Am I going to be embarrassed? So definitely don't minimize the fact that folks don't know candidates. They have to be educated about the ballot, and making a voting plan is crucial. Now, I worked labor organizing, and a voting plan for labor is, oh, great. So you're going to vote. What are you doing before? Oh, you're taking your kid to school. Oh, okay, great. Where does your child go to school? Oh, okay, great. So you're going to go directly after that? Oh, so you're going to drop them off and then go. Oh, okay. Or what are you doing later? Or, so really getting specific about where they're going to be, because the more they talk it through with you, the more they're actually making that vote plan. And jot it down, right? Leave them some reminder as to how they're going to vote. Like, oh, so here, let me just jot it down for you. So you're going to go right after you drop your kids off, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. Perfect. Why don't you put this on your fridge so you'll remember? So like, that's a visual for them too. I also, Ebony, you said something about about not wanting to bug people. You're going to get that, right? I think, you can talk, like, it happens. Even if you call somebody once or twice, they'll be like, oh my gosh, because like everybody's calling, right? And they're getting these robocalls, and they're getting these messages on TV and Facebook, and like everybody's talking about it, and every candidate's trying to get in front of them. So it's like, when you receive that message about like, oh my gosh, why are you bothering me? Why are you calling me so much? The answer, and there's like only one answer, is because it's that important. That's it. It is that important that you vote. We would not be doing this if you weren't that important. So you are that important. And I will call you and I will check on you because it is that important.
That's great. I agree.
Cool. So maybe I can just like run through, we have a few more slides that might sort of like make concrete some of the recommendations that have already been made, just so folks can see that there will be some slides that you can refer to later, and then we'll reopen for questions and any more, strategies. So are people seeing the slide share again? Just to confirm. Yeah. Okay, cool. So those tips I think are super helpful, and Jelena can like help us with probably diving a little deeper on some of the tips I'm going to share here. So voter contact, like what we're focusing on today, is really about like, how do you get the most out of the list you're building, right? And so your list is coming in different ways. We covered a bunch of that on webinar number 2, different strategies to build your list, like through community events, doing, door knocking, as Barb was kind of flagging, some of the grassroots strategies that Ebony was talking about as well. So there are lots of different ways to build a list of potential voters. We're not gonna focus on those right now. I would encourage you to go listen to webinar 2 for like a lot more detail, to that recording, for a lot more detail about how to build your list. But like, so then how do you get the most out of the list you're building? So if we assume, like, say you have a list of 200 contacts, right? We're calling that your voter universe. And these are probably 200 people who, because of the communities we're connected to, may not vote in every election. They might not always vote in like midterms, for example. They might vote in presidential elections, but they don't always consistently vote in midterms. So really the goal is like, of your 200 voters that are your universe, how many of them can you get to actually vote, right, by election day? And not just that, but because we've just talked about like folks don't always have information about what's on their ballot. A lot of times information can be confusing. So how many of them can you also reach with information about what's on their ballot by election day? So this is sort of like, this is the goal for the next, from now until November. This is the actual goal, is like, how many voters are you going to reach with information, solid information about the issues that's grounded in, what they care about and what's important to our communities. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, like how do you check if somebody voted, right? So this is a question that we just wanted to make sure we address. Like, how do you know if someone voted? Well, number one, you can ask them. But, kind of as Jelena was saying earlier, people don't always have a very clear plan around voting, or they're like, of course I'm going to vote, stop calling me, or yeah, of course I'm going to vote. But then you find out they didn't know what time their polling place was open, or they were planning to go vote at 8 o'clock and the polls close at 7. Oops. So yeah, how do you check if someone voted? You can ask them. You can also check the voter rolls. Like that is public information. It's public information whether somebody voted, not how they voted, but whether they voted. So usually that information is available It depends on your state, your county, how you get that information. This is something you can call your registrar of voters and ask them about how to get this information. It may vary depending on how they voted. If they voted by mail, if they voted early or absentee, or if they voted in person. But usually you can get like pretty much a finalized list within about a month or so of the election. So that's how you could really confirm. Like if you wanted to check, you're like, I built this list of 200 voters, how many of them actually voted? You could go and look at the voter rolls after the election and check to see how many of your 200 actually turned out. So that's something that's cool, that's good to do.
And that's something also that's not known, that you have access to that. You won't know how they voted, but you know they made it into the box, and that's data that you really, really want to have.
Yep. Exactly. And so, so that can be a more reliable way to actually know if they really did vote, even if they told you they voted. you can really check and confirm. And so like right now, for example, you could probably get that information. In most states, you can get this for your primary, depending on when the primary is happening. So in California, our primary was the first Tuesday in June. The voter rolls for the June primary are available. So that's something that technically we can pull and look, if folks are telling us they voted in the primary, we can look at that. Also on the day of the election, if you know where they're gonna vote, like what their polling place is, you can go to the polling place, and the polling place has a list of all the voters that are registered and will be voting there, or are expected to vote there. And they are basically like checking, you know, you can like check people off your list throughout the day. If you're focusing on a particular precinct, like a particular polling place. So these are some ways you could check. They require different level of like capacity, like volunteer capacity or human resources. They also might, some of these also have a cost to them, right? So the voter rolls, you may be able to get access to the voter rolls in coalition with other organizations. Maybe like an organization is going to buy it, but if you were to buy it, it costs money if you buy it yourself. It's not that much, so it's definitely something that like organizations could split a budget on. So for example, I was just looking at in Alameda County where I live, to get the who voted file for the June primary. If I wanted it for the whole county, it would be about $200. So, you know, that's not insignificant, but if a few organizations were to split it, or like maybe a coalition is getting it anyway and they'll just share it with you. Usually that's the case. Like there are folks who are already buying this file, right? In your community, figure out who they are. Maybe you have a relationship with them already, and see if you can get it. And I know some of our folks have been doing that already. So, but also in order to really be able to check after the election who voted, you want to be building your voter contact like sheet. So here's an example of a sample voter contact tracking sheet. So you have, and I know a lot of folks have already been collecting pledges, and so you're collecting some of this information already. So, but these are some fields that you might want to add if you haven't been collecting them already. So as you're making your contacts over the next few months, you want to be checking, like, are they registered? They've pledged to vote, but are they really registered? And are they registered where they think they are registered? And this is something you can help them look up. Usually the individual will need to look it up themselves, and that's kind of what Barb was talking about with the Secretary of State page. Generally, you're going to have to provide some information, like maybe your driver's license number or a Social Security, part of a Social Security number. And so most people are not going to give you that information to look it up for them. But if you have like an iPad and you're out somewhere talking to folks in the community, you can help them look it up themselves to make sure that they're registered where they think they're registered. So you want to be collecting, like, are they registered to vote? Like either they told you they're registered or you had a way to check. You want their street address where they're registered, because that's how you're going to be able to look at, if you did want to look at the voter rolls, or if you did want to go to the polling places or target a few polling places, this is how you're going to know if you have the right Bugs Bunny. There could be like more than one Bugs Bunny at a polling place, right? Or in the county. So you want to make sure you have the right one. There could be a Bugs Bunny that, like, you know, doesn't believe in healthcare doesn't believe healthcare could be available. You don't necessarily need that Bugs Bunny to vote. You want the Bugs Bunny that's like supporting universal healthcare. to be on your list. So their phone number is going to be very helpful for you in terms of contacting them, phone banking. Their email address, not everyone has an email, but if they do, often the voter registrars are now collecting that information as well, by the way. So you might be able to get that information off the voter rolls. People don't always give their best email address when they're registering to vote. They, you know, like I know I use some like Yahoo account, and who uses Yahoo, but but Bugs Bunny here uses AOL, which is even worse. So, but like collecting folks' email means that you could send them information about like what's on the ballot or about the candidate form you're organizing. So, and then you want to start tracking, like, how are they planning to vote, right? Once you've contacted them, are they planning to vote by mail? Are they planning to vote in person? Are they planning to early vote if that's an option where you live? Are they planning to vote on election day? All of those things are going to impact how you actually approach turning them out and when you approach turning them out, right? So with people who are planning to early vote or vote by mail, you definitely want to get to them pretty early in the process with all the information you have, because you don't want them to vote before they got the information, like your flyer, for example, with information about what the candidates' stances are on issues. And then you also are going to want to, at some point, if they're planning to vote in person, you might want to start tracking if they need rides to the polls. So that's how, you know, the Ebony and the crew out there ended up literally taking like 60 people to the polls. So I'm going to just like run through these real quick, and then we will reopen for like questions. So the goal is 3 follow-up contacts. This is what we're proposing to you all. We suggest that you try to have 3 follow-up contacts before folks start voting. So either before early voting starts or before your voter registration deadline, whichever one comes first. And those vary from state to state. Mostly this is somewhere in like early October to mid-October, depending on the state. But the reason is because if anybody moved or changed their name or party affiliation, they're gonna need to re-register. And so you wanna make sure you talk to them and that they have that information. And also like make sure they know their options for voting. There's a lot of stuff changing around voting. Including, as we talked about earlier, voter ID laws, but also like how they might be able to vote. So maybe somebody didn't know that early voting is an option, and they could go to their county registrar's office and vote on, and they haven't been able to figure out how to, you know, get time between their 2 jobs on the Tuesday, but they could actually go on Monday and early vote. Maybe they didn't know that was an option. So you really want to be contacting them soon so that they can be making these plans. So, you know, in Texas, for example, the election is November 6th, but folks could be voting as early as October 22nd. And they have to be registered or re-registered at their new address by October 9th. So you're going to really want to be hitting folks up before that October 9th deadline. In Oakland, this is just another example, you can actually start early voting before the voter registration deadline. So this is why we are encouraging you to look at both sets of dates and take them both into account when making your voter contact plan. And then Colorado also has like similar early voting dates to Texas. So so that's your like voting timeline and voting window. And I think one of the cool things about Colorado is that they have what's called EDR. They have election day registration. So you can register and vote on election day. And Colorado is one of the only states that has that. It's pretty special, and a lot of folks, especially if they've moved to Colorado, might not know that that's an option for them. So you can actually be doing, you know, registration and GOTV. It's a bit of a different strategy in Colorado, right up to election day. So this is just some sample, you know, content for follow-ups. These could be done through phone or email, or a combination of those, or going to the doors, or, you know, community events. We suggest like starting off with reminding them where you met, you know, they signed your pledge to vote, make sure they know when election day is. and start asking them about like their voting plans. Like, did they, have they moved? You're trying to like basically confirm their registration status with them. Make sure, even if they told you they're registered to vote, ask them if you can like help them look it up. So here's an example of how you can look up voter registration status. Every Secretary of State, every state has this in through the Secretary of State website. Again, you usually need people's, people usually are going to do this themselves, but they might be willing to do it with you right there, like on their iPad, so that you can help them check it. And they might be like, oh, I need to re-register at my new address or something like that. Also, we suggest, you know, starting to invite them to community events. And I know a lot of folks are already doing that. Community events, forums, meetings. You can have, one of the things that my friends and I do a lot is like ballots and brunch. So we'll just like, you know, people at different houses, like, cause our ballot is huge and we need to educate ourselves about it. So we get together for like a brunch and basically spend about like anywhere from 2 to 4 hours usually talking through the ballot, what we know about the different candidates and things like that. So inviting folks to, you know, either existing candidate forums or events that you might be organizing is a great outreach strategy as well to keep building that relationship. And then you definitely want to make sure you're also getting to them about what's actually on their ballot and what do they need to know about some of the races that you all think are really important, right? So there are a lot of DA races, for example. Color of Change is doing a lot of work around district attorney races. Definitely recommend checking that out. Movement Voter Project has an excellent list of local partners, but you can look at, you know, you can look at what other local organizations are doing, and you can send either via email or mail, you can send nonpartisan information about the candidates and be like, here's what your ballot looks like. Well, do you know that this candidate, you know, this candidate only supports these kinds of schools, and this candidate like thinks public schools should be improved and available to everyone. That's totally legit nonpartisan voter education about what's on the ballot. So obviously you're going to need folks to do this. So this is just like a few tips. You know, you want to be focusing on volunteer recruitment already, starting to focus on volunteer recruitment for the phone banks, for like flyer dissemination and things like that. It's okay to leave voicemails and messages if you don't reach people. You can also let them know they can call back. And my recommendation is to set up a Google Voice number that like your chapters can share or have access to. It's free. And the voicemails, if they leave a message, it can either be sent to somebody's phone or it can be in an email account where you all could be checking, and like maybe, you know, somebody checks it on Tuesday, somebody checks it on Wednesday and like calls people back. And then yeah, definitely think about, and I know folks are already thinking about this, email and text. And so Movement Voter Project has a lot of amazing resources to identify, you know, what they're actually working on, like driving resources to progressive groups on the ground. But I just wanted to show you a little screenshot of their page, because I think one thing that can be useful is for your chapter, or if you're trying to figure out where to get involved, you can actually search for who's doing progressive voter organizing in your area. So you could search geographically, you can also search by issue areas. So it's just a great way to kind of like get a little bit of a landscape of some of the organizations doing voter organizing. So with that, we wanted to just like reopen it up again for the last 10 minutes or so. And I also wanted to see if Jelena had anything to add here.
You mentioned so many important things, and this is like such great information. And I want to apologize to Nina because I did not get her slides. I have had a migraine headache and it's not going away. So yesterday I was done, but you did that. Like, that was amazing. I think that, like, let's demystify the vote, right? Let's take all this mystery away from the vote and voting. And the way you can do that is a couple of ways. Like Angel, share your story, right? Share why this vote is important to you. Share that the last presidential election was won because folks stayed home. Folks didn't vote. like Nana said at the beginning. They either were like, I don't like either one, or, you know, and we're not saying, you know, definitely only do the, what is it, the best of two evils or whatever that is, but like, do staying home is how we got where we are right now. And also be confident as you're going in, right, about your issue, about what you're doing, about what you know, and about why, again, this is so important. Movementize the vote, right? Like, the vote matters because we can do this. And you have to explain it. Don't think that folks already know. They don't know, right? Some folks can't read and would read. But like, it's up to you because of the 3 contacts that Nana suggested. Like, you will get to know folks and they'll open up to you. If one, you share your story and you're just super real with them. Yes, have a script. Yes, give your volunteers a script, a rap, whatever you want to call it. But let folks know that you're there for them as a support, not only blowing in and out because their neighborhood matters, right? But like, that you really care and that they're really that important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And you all are so well positioned to do that because you already have relationships with a lot of these folks. Like, you might be organizing people who are living in your neighborhood, in your community, who are accessing services close to where you do or where you work or volunteer. And so that, that relationship that's not transactional about voting, where it's not like you're just trying to get a vote out of them, which is the way that candidates are coming to them, right? Often is the candidate wants the vote. You are talking to them because you're offering them something different. You care about the issues in your community. And even if they're disillusioned by, whoever's at sort of like the top of the ballot, or think that their vote up there doesn't make a difference, these local races will make a difference. And often those local races are swung by like tens of votes or hundreds of votes. I worked on a city council campaign a number of years ago where we lost by like 1,000 votes, and it was an amazing, it was an incredible campaign and really built a lot of sort of like progressive solidarity around Oakland. So there can be victory even in like electoral loss as well, because of the issues that are getting raised and the coalitions that are getting built. So I just want to see again if anybody had any like questions or comments before we close out. Anything else folks want to share? Okay.
Well, y'all, I'm out there. I'm in these streets, like Ebony and I say. Like, I am in these streets. My schedule is who knows, but stay in touch. Let me know where you're at, and when I'm in town, I'm happy to pop in, happy to meet with you, happy to like have you ride along and like, let's go meet people that are doing this work. Let me work with you that day, or if you want to plan for it, let me know. My schedule is everywhere. I'm all over the country. One thing I want to say that we're doing too is for Florida, for the primary and for the Arizona primary, we're calling from Puerto Rico. Just the other day we did that. We made 2,772 calls from San Juan to voters in Florida. And we're going to do that again leading up to the primary for Arizona and Florida. So again, that's the call to action coming from the island to voters in Florida saying, hey, if you love your island, you're going to vote.
That's such a powerful strategy. And I really want to thank Jelena for sharing, your expertise and your knowledge, and also for inspiring us to, think really creatively and differently, and to kind of like demand more from our leadership, especially on Puerto Rico. And like, thank you for highlighting that. It's such an important issue. Really appreciate it, and appreciate you being here.
Yeah, it's an honor, y'all. I'm gonna go get out the vote in Milwaukee County now.
Go do that. So
all right.
Just a reminder to everyone to save the date for our next webinar, which is Tuesday, September 14th. It's going to be the last webinar in our PWNVotes series, and that one's going to focus on like very concrete get out the vote strategies. So we hope that you will like start thinking about how to use some of this information between now and then and start, you know, building a voter contact plan. And as you're starting to, you know, identify how your voters might be planning to vote, like, is everybody voting on election day? Is everybody, you know, voting, are most of your folks voting by mail? Depending on what the options are in your state, there you will be building sort of like a customized GOTV plan depending on like what your folks are telling you they're going to do. And so we hope you can join us for that. Do feel free to get in touch with any questions at any time. Please check out both of our websites, Movement Vote and PWN's Election Center resources. They're really, I think there's a lot on there that can be very helpful. And yeah, go get out there, folks. We can do this. Thank you all so much for your work, and special thanks to Barb, Ebony, Angel, and everybody else who like shared their work and their wisdom with us too. Have a great day, everyone.